We're living in what feels like a golden age of indie games. With AAA titles pumping out sloppy, bug-filled disappointments more and more often these days, it feels like every other week you hear about an indie game made by like 3 guys in a basement that alters your brain chemistry forever because of how good it is. And when that game's marketed as a Souls-like Metroidvania first-person shooter, I'm definitely interested. Frogmonster is a passion project from developer Ben Jungwirth, combining the patterned, multi-phase boss fights of a Soulslike with the fast-paced movement and gunplay of an arena shooter, and the level design and exploration of a Metroidvania thrown in for some spice. Now, obviously, trying to combine each of these genres into one game is a really ambitious idea, as there's a lot of conflicting principles between the genres. But if any game is able to successfully combine all 3 into something fun and cohesive, I wouldn't want to be the person to miss it. We recently passed just over 2 years since Frogmonster released on Steam, and it's gotten a handful of updates since then, so join me as we take a closer look to see if it can live up to the hype. The game begins as you are literally born into a small pond inside of a cave, and your creator Melora, who's a massive creepy looking bird, explains that you've been designed as a creature of war to exterminate the army of monsters her brother set loose on the world. But the music's really lighthearted as she says it, and she seems nice, so what the hell. From there, you're given a tongue to lick things, and the ability to finally turn down the main theme that's been looping non-stop up until now, and that's that. After a few rooms of killing flies and licking every plant, rock, and wall you can find, you come across a moss man? Swamp monster? From this point on, you've got about a 50-50 chance of being able to tell what animal or bug something is supposed to be, or just accepting that it's some sort of random creature. The Moss Man gives you a shotgun and lets you know that everyone's counting on you to save him, and he too sends you off. You make your way to the end of the cave, and finally you're faced with your first boss fight, Groth. Yeah, see, I just have no idea what he's supposed to be, turtle, maybe? As you'd expect from the first boss fight, it exists to introduce you to the combat, ease you into how movement works, things like that. But what's great is that even this first boss fight has a fun gimmick in that you can bounce on its back to avoid most of its attacks. It's just the first example of every boss in the game being so memorable and fun by having a unique identity in how you fight it. But more on that later. Now, once you've defeated Groth, the most untrustworthy looking man in the entire game rises from the depths to introduce himself. I know that one, that is a frog. He explains that while he doesn't like violence, he loves chopping up the corpses of bosses so that he can cook and eat them, and he'll pay you for every boss you kill. So, he gives you some money, and then he too sends you on your way. And that's pretty much it in terms of story exposition. You'll notice as enemies spawn into the world that they come out of these little fruit shapes, which is what the bird lady and her brother used to create life. It's your job to figure out why her brother is making evil creatures that want to take over the world, and save everyone else in it. It's worth pointing out that this game does have a story to it, but it's only just present enough to sort of give you an idea of who's supposed to be on the receiving end of your shotgun. From here, Frogmonster lets its charm guide you through the game, and one of the heavy lifters there is the voxel art style. From the map itself to the enemies and the weapons, everything is crafted in a way that feels really campy and fun, and is impressive for something that was just made by one person. Now, the more keen-eyed among you might have noticed that some of the monsters and NPCs in this game look a little cursed. Like they've got some uncanny valley going on, and I think that holds true for the entire game, but it's something that you get used to pretty quickly, and honestly, I came to find it kind of charming near the end. For the most part. Jesus. One of my favorite examples of that is actually the frog you play as. You can use reflections to get a good look at him, and he's got a really dopey looking stiff model, and it feels like the developer leaned all the way into that by using funny animations for things like weapon swapping and reloading. Another example of the art style being very intentional and being so good at growing on you. The one thing I don't love about the first few minutes of the game though is unfortunately the music. Now that's not to say there aren't some banger tracks, especially in the latter half. But the game does this weird thing where it feels like tracks keep playing for longer than they're supposed to sometimes, and it makes you wonder if maybe something got stuck on loop. And a few of the early tracks, especially the first main menu theme of the game, repeats the same couple of segments over and over, which gets grating really quickly. Now on the other hand, sound effects like gun and enemy sounds are awesome, with a good amount of them sounding like the developer was just having fun making noises in the mic.
Rubber the gravitar. Ma, ma, ma.
Boom. Noticeable.
They actually fit really well into the vibe the game's going for, and alongside some of the more serious sounding effects, come together into something I'm a really big fan of. Now, the star of Frogmonster is of course going to be the gameplay, specifically the combat, the movement, and the encounter design. The thing I have to praise first is the healing system. Being described as a Soulslike, you'd expect some sort of flask situation, but the developer has done a great job of balancing that concept with the fast-paced nature of an arena shooter. So no stopping for a quick chug only to get stabbed in the back in this game. Instead, the game utilizes a magic system alongside its weapons, allowing you to cast things like fireballs or lightning strikes at the cost of mana dropped from kills. Each spell also heals you for various amounts, and this serves as your main form of healing in the game. You never have to stop for even a second as long as you can keep landing your spells, which does wonders for the flow of combat. Even in boss fights that don't spawn adds, you get sort of phases that are marked by the boss dropping some mana for you to get some healing. I think this is a really elegant solution to the cap on healing that Souls-like combat demands, while still maintaining the fast-paced action that you have to have when you do an arena shooter. Alongside the mana, enemies and bosses also drop ammo for your weapons, increasing in variety the more your weapon pool expands. A constant frustration I tend to have with shooters in the genre is how often they showcase a huge arsenal of weapons, but when you actually get into it, only a few of them are worth using. By the time you've beaten the game, you realize you've barely touched half the pool of weapons because they just don't justify using themselves. Frogmonster proposes two solutions to this: ammo economy and weapon upgrades. Aside from the starting pistol, all of your weapons have a really limited ammo pool. You replenish that ammo by killing mobs and phasing boss fights, but what this means is that you're constantly rotating between every single weapon you have as the others run out of ammo, and when it's time to rotate back around again, everything's typically filled up. What this means in practice is that you're sort of forced to learn every weapon's strength, and you get the hang of each of their niches in a way that feels really natural. I made use of every single weapon in the game constantly, which is definitely not the case for other games in the genre. And Frogmonster doesn't lack for variety either. It's got all the usual arena shooter suspects, with early weapons including a shotgun, machine gun, and flamethrower, and later drops including things like a grenade launcher, a minigun, and the tried and true cannon. Each weapon has an identity strong enough that they all have a situation where they feel like the right call, and this is further reinforced by each weapon having you choose one of two different upgrades that pushes it further into one's strength. Maybe you want your shotgun to hold lots of ammo, or maybe you want each individual shot to be devastatingly strong. Another charming mechanic you'll encounter is various normal-sized bugs, like flies and crickets and such, that you can catch with your tongue to eat. Eating each different bug for the first time gives you a unique trait that you permanently unlock and then can slot into your build for varying point costs, allowing you to pick from different bugs to augment your playstyle. More dashes, faster reloads, more mana for your spells, and plenty of other unique effects for when you want to get creative. Now, what I think is really cool about the bug system is that after you've eaten a bug once, every time you eat that same bug again, it gives you a temporary buff. Now, some of them heal you after you eat them, but others give you things like move speed, reload speed, a flat amount of ammo back, and the like. The bugs are all over the entire game, including inside boss arenas or difficult areas of combat, which really helps nail the frog feeling as you hop around the battlefield constantly catching flies with your tongue while you fight. Just make sure you turn on the trait that makes your tongue auto-lock onto bugs. The bug catching and magic are both made so engaging because they're supported by a really fluid movement system. Movement in the game is decently floaty, giving you the option to build up momentum and fly through levels like a speedrunner if you really want to. You've got your dash that you can use to skate around as well, which really makes you feel like a frog as you're essentially hopping from place to place instead of walking. And you'll need every ounce of mobility the game gives you, because it's hard enough just to catch a damn bug to eat, let alone how quickly some of the enemies get in your face in this game. No, what? But what's charming about the mob design, though, is how uniquely crafted every single one of them is. Oh my god, okay. New quirks, or gimmicks, are constantly introduced to freshen up the combat experience, like flying bugs that fire a continuous laser, or snails that can only be killed from behind after stunning them, seahorses that latch onto you with their tails and pull you in, whatever this thing is that jumps out from behind the trees. There are countless unique designs for each of the mobs that you go up against, usually that incorporate the characteristics of the animals they're based on. And none of the enemies in the game stand out to me as that one annoying special that has a design that makes you roll your eyes or is really annoying to fight. You are constantly being introduced to something new that forces you to change how you approach combat by just a little bit every time. It feels like encounters were designed specifically to avoid the feeling of fighting the same enemy just reskinned over and over again. Now, this concept is especially true when it comes to the boss fights in the game. I think sometimes the word gimmick can have a bit of a negative connotation to it, as it can occasionally imply like a cheapness or a lack of depth, but I really reject that concept, especially in this game. Honestly, I think gimmicks are fun. The basic enemies in the game do a good enough job of keeping you on your toes and making you reevaluate your combat loop, and the bosses often capitalize on what their respective zones established. There isn't a single one that's forgettable or unremarkable because all of them have that gimmick that makes them a completely unique experience to fight. Even what is essentially the tutorial boss at the start of the game. A huge butterfly with wings that change color based on where and how much you've shot it. A giant snake that forces you to literally play a game of Snake while you fight. A stick bug that fills the arena with sticks and emotes on your ass when he catches you. And once you get further into the game, the big milestone bosses really are where Frogmonster shows the best of what it has to offer. There's one point where you think you're going up against the final boss, and he has like 5 different unique ability cycles that you have to adapt to in just the first phase of the fight, before then going into a unique phase for each weapon you currently have access to, forcing you to only use that weapon until the phase is complete. It tests you on everything you've learned up until that point to succeed, and once you've finally taken down the boss, you realize you still have a whole other half of the game to explore. For most people considering trying out the game, bosses are going to be the big selling point of Frogmonster, and for me, they certainly live up to that responsibility. These bosses are so good that they even manage to make multiple different underwater segments engaging and fun. Underwater levels obviously have a bit of a reputation to them, so it's always great to see someone manage to pull it off in a way that doesn't make you want to go jump in a pond. And it's not just the bosses themselves that do that either, but the level design as well. There are roughly 30 zones in Frogmonster, with each one being thematically unique and visually looking really good.
Temple and Tier. Oh my god!
A decent amount of the zones are essentially big curved hallways with lots of open space to further encourage you to hop through the levels quickly if you want to. Basically every aspect of the game is designed with freedom of movement and player control at the forefront, and the level design plays a huge part of that. I do want to say though, for a game that's so focused on fast movement that keeps you hustling and constantly engaged, there are a few portions of the game that unfortunately work against that concept. Notably, the game is described as a Metroidvania, which to me means a huge open map with lots of branching paths that you have to unravel yourself through exploration, but I don't think that's as present here as you might expect. The fast-paced, non-stop, hold W style of combat has potential to clash with the slow, methodical exploration of a Metroidvania, something you'd expect from a game like Hollow Knight. And while I think for the most part they don't clash in Frogmonster, there are a few spots in the game where I think, unfortunately, they do. Now, it's important to note that a significant portion of the game is linear. Don't get me wrong, there are branching pathways and different places for you to go explore, but a large portion of the game is just you clearing the level as you move forward. There are a few secrets in the game, not as many as you'd expect, but a few, and I found that while looking for them, the art style of the game and the nature of the landscape often resulted in confusing navigation when those branching pathways did appear. A lack of identifiable landmarks as the textured terrain kind of blended together in some areas made it particularly difficult to tell if I'd traveled a path before. And it wouldn't be a true Soulslike without a zone filled with frustrating mechanics that genuinely piss you off, and in Frogmonster, that's the well. So the well is essentially a giant elevator that goes deep into the ground with only a single torch for light. You're supposed to protect your torch while surviving waves of enemies so that you can see, but if you actually do let someone get close to put out your torch, it becomes a very frustrating experience. Pitch black darkness with no way to relight the torch and no path forward means you run around in the dark trying to find a solution that isn't actually there. I think it's a golden rule of gaming to not make the player completely blind unless you have a supplement that's fun, and that does not exist here. What I ended up having to do after like 10 minutes of trying to salvage the situation is just exit to main menu and reload into the game, as there's no way to return to your spawn or to town or anything like that. Now luckily this part of the game is pretty short, and once you've suffered through it once, you know what to expect and you can equip a bug that makes it so you glow in the dark, but goddamn, never again. But with the well aside, Frogmonster is just fucking awesome, guys. It's an incredible experience and a very impressive accomplishment for just one dev to create on their own. Combat is addictingly fun, and you'll find yourself appreciating just how much thought went into the entire game every step of the way. This feels like one of the purest expressions of what gaming as an art form can really be, and I cannot recommend it enough. There are Souls-likes all over the place these days, and the retro-style shooters are really popular right now too, but I haven't seen any title put the two together like Frogmonster does, and its design is so good that I imagine it'll affect how I think about other games in both genres going forward. It took me about 13 hours to beat it, including the special boss-related surprise that comes after beating the game, and for 20 bucks, I think that's a steal. But that's my thoughts on Frogmonster. If you happen to try it out for yourself, let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.